evening and welcome to our ReggieCon panel, Eyes Unclouded by Hate, the Spirit of Hayao Miyazaki. This is our sixth and final ReggieCon panel of the 2020-2021 year at Illinois State University. My name is Amelia Noel Elkins, and I am the Interim Assistant Vice President for Student Success at Illinois State. We are thrilled tonight to join in the celebration of Asian Pacific Heritage Month through this conversation about the co-founder of Studio Ghibli. Before we begin the panel, just a few details to keep everything running smoothly for all of you in the audience. Please know that this session is being recorded and will be archived on the ReggieCon website. Also, if you need confirmation that you attended tonight's ReggieCon event, we will post a link to a form for you to submit a request for confirmation of attendance. While the presenters' video and audio are on, we cannot see or hear any guests. However, we will be monitoring the Q&A function, so we encourage you to ask questions of the presenters. After some initial discussion, our panelists will be happy to take questions from the attendees. Please also visit the ReggieCon website at illinoisstate.edu/ReggieCon to find ReggieCon merch, find recordings of previous ReggieCon panels, and for information about ReggieCon panels for the 2021-2022 academic year. Please know also that a portion of the proceeds from the ReggieCon merchandise sales will be donated to the Red and White Fund to benefit Illinois State students in financial need. Our hope also is that in the coming year, we will be able to host live and in-person options for ReggieCon. Please keep checking the website for updates. At this time, I'm pleased to introduce our moderator and panelist for this discussion of Princess Mononoke, Dr. Scott Jordan, who is the professor and chair of psychology here at Illinois State. Scott, I will hand it over to you to introduce yourself and the rest of the panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Noel Elkins, and welcome everyone to ReggieCon, the con that asks the question, what's your story? I'm Dr. Scott Jordan, AKA Zombie Scotty, cognitive psychologist, philosopher here at Illinois State University. And in tonight's panel, we celebrate Asian Pacific Heritage Month with a discussion entitled Eyes Unclouded by Hate, the Spirit of Hayao Miyazaki, in which we'll focus on his masterwork, Princess Mononoke, Mononoke Heim. But before we go any further, I just have to say this is our last ReggieCon of the year, and this has been an absolute blast. And I cannot wait to do this again with all of you next year. So before we go any further, I quickly want to say thank you to people that make this thing possible. Amelia, Jana, Somer, Sean, and Danny, just from the bottom of my heart, thanks for everything you've done that's made this actually be something we can do. I also want to say, in addition, that ReggieCon would like to take a moment to send big love to our Asian Pacific heritage brothers and sisters across the country and across the world. Victor?
When we support each other, when we elevate each other, when we carry ourselves in ways that reveal a love and appreciation of difference.
We not only provide an environment that affords everyone the opportunity to examine who they are and what they want to become, we also expand our own lives.
We become bigger, more respectable versions of ourselves. We become anti-racists.
Thanks, you guys. And now, ladies and gentlemen, introducing the members of the ReggieCon crew. We'll begin with the hardest working man in comics, the one, the only Mr. Victor Dandridge Jr. Victor, please tell everyone who you are and tell us your favorite Princess Mononoke memory.
I am a self-publishing comic creator from Columbus, Ohio. I self-published through my imprint Vantage and House Productions. You guys know me by now, of course. I also teach through my You Create Comics line. And my favorite Princess Mononoke memory is the first time that I ever saw it. I almost got grounded because the movie was so long, I did not make curfew on my way home. And it was only through the grace of technology and caller ID that I was able to prove to my parents that I did call to let them know that I was going to be late to experience this phenomenal film.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Victor. Also on the ReggieCon crew, the one, the only, the amazing Dr. Teresa Rojas. Teresa, please tell the audience who you are and tell us your favorite Princess Mononoke memory.
Hi there. I am a professor of English and a professor of ethnic studies at Modesto Junior College here in Modesto, California. And I'm also the director of the Latinx Comic Arts Festival. We will be back live in March, the 25th and 26th. I cannot wait for that. Yay. And my favorite moment. So I love the moment in the film when we first see the princess and she just comes out guns a-blazing, right? And I love that she gets asked, what is the question? Are you the spirit of the forest? You know, a very gentle question. And she's like, she just says, go away. I love it. She is a honey badger from the first moment we see her.
Whole mood.
Fantastic.
I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Awesome, fantastic. And rounding out the ReggieCon crew, cosmic horror fan to my partner in crime and all things nerdy, the one, the only Dr. Eric Wesselmann. So Eric, please tell everyone who you are and tell us your favorite Princess Mononoke memory.
So I'm Dr. Eric Wesselmann. I'm a social psychologist here at Illinois State University. Love talking about all things psychology and pop culture interface. Favorite memory about Princess Mononoke. I'd watched anime a long time before seeing the film, so I was prepared for the violence, and it's pretty tame, compared to the usual blood spray you see in other anime, at least the ones I was watching. But what blew me away about watching it was, first and foremost, it was on the big screen. I mean, everything previously was usually on a TV in my parents' basement. But the complexity of the characters and narrative structure. I mean, there really isn't a I guess you could argue there may be a couple like close to two-dimensional characters, but almost everyone has something good about them and something bad about them, and there's no right answers.
That's precisely why I watched it 3 times in 2 days when I first rented it. It was fantastic. Thank you, Eric. Now, introducing tonight's special guests, we begin with ISU alum, Liverpool fan, and anime aficionado, the one, the only Mr. Tatsu Shigeta. Tatsu, please tell everyone who you are and tell us your favorite Princess Mononoke memory.
Scott. I'm Tatsu. Like Scott said, I'm an ISU alum. I'm also a PhD student at Northeastern University in Boston, and I also work in the tech industry as a data science champion, if you will. Princess Mononoke is my favorite movie of all time. I've probably seen it more than any other movie. I have probably too many fond memories of it to really pick one, but if I had to pick one, especially given the occasion, it's that Scott and I actually got to teach a class together at ISU, a senior seminar, and I got to focus my section all on Princess Mononoke, and we dove into the topic of curse. As you all know, if you've seen the movie, it's the constant throughout, and it's the most fun that I've had in my academic career. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. But really, I love Princess Mononoke because I use it as a gateway to all of my friends who are even the least bit curious about anime. And once that demon comes through the forest with all the crawlers on, people know that it's on. They're like, oh, this is anime? Okay, all right. So yeah, that's me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tatsu. Our next special guest, Mr. Ryo Shigeta, is a voice, screen, and stage actor who reads a great deal of fantasy and, as you will soon discover, has a voice made to move mountains. Ryo, please tell the audience who you are and tell us your favorite Princess Mononoke memory.
You are too kind, Scott. Hi, I'm Ryo
Listen
Shigeta.
to that voice, man.
I am an actor of voice, screen, and stage out here in Los Angeles. Sometimes translator, interpreter, and subtitler. Yeah, and more importantly, an insufferable anime nerd. And brother to Tatsu, BFA from the University of Illinois. And my favorite Mononoke memory. Well, I don't know if I want to sing for you guys this time, but okay.
Please, come on.
Right.
Um,
Come on, man. That's why we have you
so,
here.
My favorite Mononoke memory, I think, is the moment, and I was, what, 9, that I discovered that the theme song is sung by a man, Yoshikazu Mera. He is a countertenor, and it's this really high, like, it's an unmistakable soprano singer. But we were floored as 9-year-olds, and we're like, so cool. So I guess here's a little bit of it. 張り詰めた指の震える鶴よ星の光にざわめくそなたの心 something like that.
Yay!
But I do want to mention that more than anything, my best memories are the friends that I made along the way, including you, Scott, and everyone that I meet. I love to show this movie just like Tatsu, and their reactions are priceless. I make more friends with this movie than I do any other way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you for singing, man. That was fantastic. Wow. And that is such a hauntingly beautiful tune. So thank you so much. Our final special guest for the evening is renowned animator, Mr. Larry Houston. Mr. Houston's participation in tonight's panel is being sponsored by the Sage Trust Grant procured by Dr. Eric Wesselmann. So Eric, would you please introduce our illustrious guest
Thank you,
panel?
Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my extreme pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Larry Houston, animation producer, director, storyboard artist, who has worked on such treasured programs as X-Men the Animated Series, G.I. Joe, and Care Bears, among many, many others. With no further ado, please stand if you can, the one, the only, Mr. Larry Houston.
Hi, everyone. Appreciate being here. It's fun to talk about a director that I influenced my career so greatly because I love his work. I have almost every film he's made, you know, on either, believe it or not, on Laserdisc, DVDs. I mean, I started recognizing his talent way back in the 80s when he first started doing Cagliostro's Castle, and then Castle in the Sky and La Puta, and, you know, all those films. So my interest in him started way back when, you know.
So do you have a favorite Princess Mononoke memory?
For me, it was when I first saw the film, believe it or not, it was all in Japanese. I had no idea what was going on. But when I saw that the creepy crawler come out of the woods, I was like, wow, this really caught my eye, all of the animation and stuff, and the production values that's always that you can see in all of his films, the backgrounds, the haunting music. I approach it like a director, and it's like it just really floored me again. Like here's another masterpiece from the guy. And for me, it was seeing the monster and how it's depicted, and then seeing how he let the story unfold in a natural progression, which can, you know, and when you do that, you can draw in everybody because you're like being introduced to that world very naturally, and then you can see what's going on with the characters. You know, the one thing I didn't get when I first saw it, because it was in Japanese, was the subtext, but the broad strokes were all there, and you could figure out what was going on. And I got a chance because of Disney Plus. I got a chance to watch it again this morning.
Oh, that's awesome.
Great. You know,
and just before we see that monster come out of the forest, we see Ashitaka's amazing climb up to the top of the tower. That animation is just stunning.
Yeah, they looked like
Legolas who?
It was animated on ones going all the way up. It was like really smooth.
They're crazy good. So my favorite Princess Mononoke memory is actually raising my kids on it and watching it with them for the first time, covering their eyes. And eventually they say, Dad, I know the head comes off. So I say, okay, I'm a bad dad. Go ahead and watch because it's friggin' awesome. And then having them grow up and give it to people, it's like, okay, I've been a successful parent. If that's what they value, and that's what they want to share with their friends. So it's just fantastic. And I'm so glad that all of you are here. So the format of this panel is pretty simple. I asked each of you to come up with your favorite character, favorite line, or favorite scene. And what we'll do is I'll ask one of you which one of those three you want to pick. Tell us what it is. We'll all talk about it a little bit, and then I'll go to the next person's favorite bit. So we're going to start with Larry. What's your favorite character, your favorite scene, or your favorite line?
Wow. I guess for me the favorite scene was what I just spoke about. It was like the introduction of the wild boar with the infection worms all over it. It just mesmerized me, and I just couldn't take my eyes off it. It was like creepy and fascinating at the same time. I was just like, wow, how did he do that? It looks so good, and I wouldn't want to get anywhere near it. It was gorgeous for me. I'm trying to think of some other moments because there's so many in this film that are so breathtaking, you know. But for me overall, it's the way the narrative unfolded, and you got the idea of the story and the subtext of what was going on in such a natural way. He's such a good storyteller that way.
Anybody want to follow up on that?
I mean, I definitely agree. At the time that I saw it at the ripe, mature age of 16, aside from like Akira, the only like real anime that I had seen was Dragon Ball. So this was a huge eye opener in terms of skill set of storytelling and animation. I totally agree, Mr. Houston. It was like, what is this? Like, you thought you knew, and all of a sudden when that demon comes out of the forest, you're like, I don't know if I like this. I know that I love it though.
Yeah.
And the reason I watched it 3 times is because like every scene violates my expectations about every character. And that itch is good work. And I just had to I had to keep going back and seeing if I could make it something it was. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, there were also little moments when he's pulling back the string and he shoots an arrow and takes the guy's head off. It was like, what happened? What did I just see? It's like, whoa, little small things like that. Just, it's like, oh my God.
Well, there's humor in that scene too, because the guy's head flies off and the person next to him just turns around and rides away unceremoniously.
The smartest henchman ever.
Yes. Yeah. The little touches really add to the realism of the shot of the scene that he's created, and it makes it work so well.
And there's also the whole scene with Ashitaka taking the arrow out, and it seems the frame rate is different at different times to accentuate realistic motion in different scenes, and that tension between frame rates is really psychologically powerful.
Yeah definitely.
There are definitely intentional points that you feel off, and part of it is because there's a lot of subtext that is not present in his previous films. This specifically is due to it being from Ashitaka's perspective almost entirely. So a lot of the characters, you're going to find that their motives are not spoken. They're hidden. And to the point where, obviously we've all watched this several times, and just today, something sparked in my head, and I went down a rabbit hole and discovered, I'll talk about it later, some crazy stuff about this film.
That's fantastic. We'll move on to Tatsu. Favorite character, favorite line, favorite scene.
Well, if I had to choose, because I think that I can't choose a favorite character necessarily. It's an ensemble cast that's beautiful. Each character is just developed like so brilliantly. Favorite line, I'll let you take that one, Scott. I think we have a mutual favorite line.
You go ahead and take it. I'll move around.
Well, I mean, like I said, I got to teach a class on curse and what it means throughout Mononoke. And, my favorite line's got to be Ichigo saying, he's talking to Ashitaka over the fire. And he says, "So you say you're under a curse? Well, so what? So's the whole damn world." And that just really like hit home to me, because I think that it's funny because each character, I think, takes curse and also justice, and thinks that their brand of justice is the correct one. And if we're talking about having eyes unclouded, let's be real. The only character that has eyes unclouded is Yakul, right?
Yes.
So,
Good.
but favorite scene has got to be the ending sequence for me, where everything's gone down. Spirit gets to head back. The wind's blowing. Everything has been destroyed, and then comes in the green. And I remember as a kid just watching that scene, I just kind of like on the screen, I'm like, okay, I want to see exactly when the green starts coming in. And I just remember like sitting there, like, what is it? This spot? Is it that spot? Is it this spot? I just always love that, because it's just this beautiful, like, gradual greening. And you think that it's this beautiful scene, like everything's gonna be okay. Not really. Nothing's really solved at the end of the movie. Ashitaka's going to live in Irontown. He doesn't get to go live with San. I don't think that there's necessarily a resolution, but I just love that scene, because going along with what everybody has said about the artwork, I love how Miyazaki takes stillness of art and then just injects movement into it, and plays around with that just ever so perfectly. So yeah, that's gotta be my favorite scene.
Anyone want to follow up on that?
Well, for me, what I liked also about the whole film is that at the end, what you're talking about is that the story structure didn't follow a typical Hollywood film where everything gets resolved, and it didn't follow those stereotype story structure. It's like you get to the end, and the boy gets the girl. No, it doesn't. It doesn't follow that. It's like everybody goes to their own place in the story, and it ends. And I was like, that was refreshing for me, because I was like expecting the typical stuff, and I was like, no, this is better. You did, it's not resolved. Everything just moves on. I enjoyed that quite a bit. That ending.
Yeah, San goes back to the forest, and Ashitaka goes back and says, "I'm going to help them rebuild Irontown."
Yep.
I'm not, what? I gotta watch it again. Why is he going back to Irontown? He gave all these speeches and stuff, right? And that
Why
fade
doesn't he
out
go
at
back
the
to the
end.
village?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because he cut his hair, he couldn't go back.
Well,
Oh, he couldn't go. Oh, that too. Yeah.
Banished. Yeah, banished for life.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, we're gonna move on to Rio. Favorite character, favorite line, favorite scene.
all right. Actually, it sort of ties into what we're just talking about right now with the village. Now, like the first 10 minutes of the scene is some of the most action-packed footage that I've ever seen in animation. It's also the most subtext and contextually laden 10 minutes that I can think of at the moment. Now, this is this discovery that I was talking about earlier. Hisama is the village elder, right? The old lady. She sort of comes out after Ashitaka has shot the demon god and talks to it, and it's like, no, I hate humans, I curse you all, and dies, right? Sort of melts into the earth in that very sort of graphic way. What Hisama says, and I'm not sure if this is both in the dub and in Japanese, but basically she says, we will build a grave for you and revere you in this spot, so please don't curse us. And to that he says, you filthy humans, you all deserve to die. Here's what we don't see or hear, and this is confirmed by Miyazaki, is that these spirits don't really have power beyond death. They're not able to like reach from the nether world and do things. That curse is not from I think it's Nago, the boar god. it is directly from the forest god, who does have larger powers. Now, Hisama knows this. Hisama also knows that that curse, that it's not going to just, and this is what she says, it will eat away at him until he dies, you know, sink into his bones, whatever. What she knows and doesn't say is that he's going to become one of those demon gods. So he has been both cursed and blessed with superhuman power, but also the power of hatred that will consume him. He eventually, she knows, will become one of these things. Now, they, the Emishi people, at least it's suggested that they're Emishi, they have been exiled by the emperor and the empire of Yamato. Now, she knows that it's this bullet that killed Nago, and associates sort of that industrial development, that hatred with Yamato and the West and all of the rest of Japan at the time. In the Jomon era where the Emishi are sort of based, there is a thought or sort of a philosophy of fight fire with fire, fight hatred with hatred, fight a grudge with a grudge. So she interprets this sort of this as an attack from them. They have cursed us. Now she tells Ashitaka, you must go with eyes unclouded by hate, and maybe you'll find, if you're good enough and meet your destiny, a way to lift this curse. That's not what she's doing. What she's doing is sending a bioweapon to the Yamato Empire to destroy them, to get back at them for cursing their village and taking away their prince. I probably sound like a conspiracy theorist, but this is confirmed.
Or a genius.
Thank you.
Pretty cool.
So Hisama's poker face might be my favorite scene in the movie.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I love the storytelling that just happened right now. And then, but wait, there's more. Because I'm like, if I
tell stories for a living.
Like, I missed that part. I gotta go. I see why we need to watch this again and again, right?
But wait, there's more.
Yeah, and this is a very layered film, and it feels, even from the beginning, it feels epic. It feels layered. It feels like I can watch it as background, but I'm gonna have to watch it again, and then I'm gonna have to watch it at least 3 times. I feel like I need to fill up my agenda for my watching of Princess Mononoke, so that I can, build that knowledge base up. So I love this. I feel like I'm behind the scenes learning all this new stuff. But I really love that feeling of the movie from the very beginning. So I'm not a big watcher of animated films. I love animation, but in shorter bursts. And I teach and study comics, but for some reason, just the larger animated film for me, I have a short attention span. So that's what it is. It's at my core. I admit it. But I found myself just compelled from the beginning with this one. Absolutely compelled. So I love hearing about this, but it's a bioweapon. Because then in my head goes dun dun dun, right? I heard that. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, yes, exactly.
And using that as a writing choice that is only going to come up in an interview later, not in bonus material to sell, is just a ace up the sleeve that as a writer has just got to be the best. Oh, you're going to ask me that question? Okay, here's what really was going on in that.
There's actually one more character that realizes the curse and what it will do before Ashitaka does. Anyone want to take a guess who it is?
Jigo?
Yes.
Yeah.
He is the one. He knows after Ashitaka explains with the little nugget of iron and what happened. And you know what he does? He's like, oh, well, I heard about this forest god out to the west. Maybe if you seek it out and get its help, the curse will be lifted. You know what he's doing? He has been charged by the emperor to get its head, because the emperor somehow got the idea that it gives eternal life. Right. So Jigo's idea is again to use Ashitaka as a bioweapon against the forest god to destroy it for him.
Genius. that sort of subtlety or like little cameo of ideas. Larry definitely is a god at, because you did that throughout the X-Men run, where you would have characters that would pop up that we as comic book fans would totally know, but nobody else knew who it was. They never named it. They never said anything. So this kind of subjective storytelling is right on line with what I've grown up with because of you, sir. So it's so great to hear it from multicultural perspectives. It's brilliant.
And on that segue, or did you want to say something, Larry?
Oh, no, go. No, keep going.
Well, we're gonna go to Victor then. Victor, favorite scene, favorite character, favorite line.
My favorite character is Lady Eboshi. She is someone who stands out amongst everyone. She stands tall for not necessarily being empowered other than by her own gumption. And it's one of the things that I love about her in terms of strong-willed characters. She is someone who, it's not a matter of being right or wrong. She has decided. And in her decision, this is what she's doing. You know, if it's wrong, she'll make up for it later on. She'll figure out a way to fix it. But this is the pinnacle of, I have decided, I am moving, and this is the way we are going. I'm taking you with me, whether you like it or not. You know, you can try to stop me, but you might get shot. I'm just keeping it 100. This is what it is. So yeah, Lady Eboshi is my favorite.
And
she's a very good character.
Oh,
yes.
Very strong character. Yeah.
That stupid pig should have killed me instead. I gotta say, when hearing you say that, what Rio said before, the fact that she never loses her cool ever in Irontown, and all these moral balance questions or whatever, she knows what she's doing for the lepers. She knows what she's doing for these women. Hey, bring whatever moral agenda you want. I get this world, and we are taking care of ourselves this way.
Yep.
I love Eboshi top to bottom. Anyone else?
I also thought she was the embodiment. She was the animated embodiment of Michelle Yeoh before Michelle Yeoh. I was just like, that is her. I realized she predated, but I was just like, ooh, I see some future casting. I love her. Yeah, I love just watching her, watching the movement, watching the reactions she had. Cool as a cucumber, right? Just absolutely. I agree.
Fantastic. Anyone else want to follow up on Lady Eboshi?
Yeah, I mean, such a departure from what you might typically see in an anime show or film, where I think the female characters, are fairly sexualized. Lady Eboshi is wearing a straight up what you would expect a samurai lord to wear.
She wears hakama.
She wears a hakama. Yeah, hakama is the pants bit that you wear over your robe, your kimono. That's what lords wear. And yeah, she's a boss. And she does not care what you think one bit. And Miyazaki does this on purpose, because Miyazaki wants you to know, that she is resolute. She does not care what you think. She has an agenda. She's merciful, but she also doesn't care if you think that what she's doing is wrong, because what she's doing is succeeding in the way that she sees fit, and she's doing that brand of justice. So I love Eboshi as well.
And she's just as aware, if not the most aware character of that world in the show. There's that great scene where Jigo's trying to get her to do something, and he gives her the letter from the emperor. She shows it to some of the ladies that work for her, says, "Do you know who this is?" "No, who's he?" I mean, just so in your face, make it clear. I don't have to explain myself to you. I'll just show it. I'll just show you who I am.
And it would have been so easy for Miyazaki to just, make a Cruella de Vil character.
Right.
Oh, I wear the skins of my hunts, and just pure evil. But you initially want to think, oh, she's the bad guy. Oh, she's the one that's tearing down the forest and having this forge in the middle of it and creating weapons. And then you go into her garden in the middle of Irontown, and then you go into her little hut where she takes care of the lepers, which
Right.
historically in Japan are just absolutely taboo people that you do not associate with. And their plight, I mean, Miyazaki himself has had a place in his heart for them and how hard things are. And Scott, I have a feeling you might talk about his little self-insert that we think happens inside that hut. It's
Yes.
all just so good.
No,
Anyway.
really. Anybody else? Final words on Eboshi.
I love her. Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, there you go. So Teresa, favorite character, favorite line, favorite scene.
Yeah, so I want to go back to that opening scene when we first meet Mononoke, and I just love that scene. I actually rewound and watched it again because it's so unexpected. And if you're obviously a first time watcher, which I was, I suspect that that's the princess, but I'm not sure because I don't think she's named right away. We just get that initial the interaction. And I love that the first time we see her, she's, she approaches, is that Moro? Is that who's wounded?
Big wolf.
Yeah.
Wounded? Yeah. And she's just like, huh. Just sucking the blood out. And I'm like, what just happened here? Did she just well, I think she just did. She did. She did. And then that sort of gentle question, are you the spirit of the forest? And she's like, do I look like the damn spirit of the forest? But that look on her face, I just loved it so much, and it was so unexpected and that in my head, the first thing I thought was she is an MF honey badger. Honey badger, I love it. She does not give,
Not a single.
I am busy and you need to go away. Bye. I'm out. Hop on my wolf and I'm out. I'm out of here. I loved that scene so much. And I thought, I can't wait to see more. I really hope this is the princess. I hope that she doesn't turn out to be, some little like tra-la-la. And I love her that in her character, there is, she's young, but there's none of that childlike playfulness that we get in some of his other films. That's just not what's happening here. And there's no like turn to that anywhere in the film. And I really appreciated that. I wanted her to stay strong and complex and a little more grown up, even though she's clearly very, very young. And then later, to go to my favorite line was when Moro is talking, I think, to Ashitaka about Mononoke, and says, because I want to say that Ashitaka calls her human. I think that's the conversation that, and Moro's like, you're very single-minded to think of her that way. He calls her my poor, ugly, beautiful daughter. I was like, oh, poor, ugly, beautiful. How dare you? And then I'm like, oh, wait, there's more. But wait, there's more.
But wait, there's more.
This whole idea of, I wanted, the professor and me wanted to pause and like have a magical discussion with people. Like, let's talk. Did everybody just see what I saw? It's just me in the room. Anybody in here just see that? Let's talk about this and how this moment creates this dichotomy of beautiful and ugly and coming together, and how we can shift that, seeing her as an animal, as half wolf, or seeing her as human or half human, like what is she? Questions of identity suddenly coming into play. I thought that was just an incredibly rich moment to just pause and say, what are we talking about here? What's going on, and who is doing the naming, and these ideas of who gets to decide identity, who gets to decide interspecial identity, not just, sort of like racial, but questions of humanity, questions of, like seeing her as a kind of beast, which takes us back to that first meeting when she is doing a very beast-like thing by sucking out this blood and spitting it out, right? So
I love what you're saying there, because I'll just quickly, that whole, what we might call bestial scene, there's another very tender bestial scene with her when she feeds Ashitaka the meat and chews it for him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then his arm lifts because it's a startling, potentially. I just thought, and listening to you talk, I thought, of course that's what Miyazaki did. He had her with blood and then with saliva, and it's all the same person. One's tender, we look, and I thought that. Okay, so I've learned something again. Eric, you wanted to say something.
Well, actually, I love that, Teresa, you brought up that line because it's one of my favorites too. And sort of tied back to what Scott was saying there as well. Identity, right? We sort of see, we all have complex aspects to our identity, right? Sometimes, there are interpersonal roles, there are the groups that we belong to. Sometimes those aspects of our identities may conflict. Right, and then we're in an uncomfortable situation, right? Especially if they're equally important. San sort of embodies this identity dissonance, right? Because as Moro says, my ugly, beautiful daughter, she's human, but she's not. She's wolf, but she's not, right? Even I think Eboshi might even say, or someone says that she's possessed by the forest, right? So she's kind of like walking the line between these two forces that really don't like each other, certainly are at odds. So when she's around the animals, she probably has to be acting like basically trying to convince them that she's not a human, right? So she has to sort of dial it up to prove her cred among them, and probably is seeing to some degree, seeing herself through the eyes of the other, right? There's probably a lot of how do they see me, right? Certainly when she's with the animals.
I think that happens too in these very oral ways, right? In the bloodletting, the chewing of the food, and then when Moro says, "I didn't eat her, I raised her instead." I could have had a good meal, had some dinner, but I was like, "I'll raise me a kid instead."
Well, I think, and I don't know if it's explicitly said, but it is known that Sun's parents threw her at Moro out of fear.
Yeah.
Right,
they were being attacked, and they were just
tells
"Take
that
the kid."
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
he does tell that story that they did that. They take off, and he's like, I guess I'll raise her instead of eating her. That's where he said, yeah.
Which is a strange show of compassion from a wolf god.
Right.
That,
And on that identity front, she dons that mask when she invades Irontown to sort of make herself completely wolf. And probably one of the most stunning animated scenes ever, when Ashitaka rips the log off the top of the building. It's just, oh my God, how many shards of wood are they animating at the same time? Unbelievable. So Eric, favorite character, favorite scene, favorite line?
Well, my scenes and the lines have already been taken by others,
Okay.
but this time no one's taken my character. So you could call it kind of a cheat. My favorite character is Ashitaka, and I recognize that, as I think it might have been Rio mentioned earlier, that the story's obviously told through his eyes that are supposed to be unclouded. And I guess I find that it's easiest for me to identify with him normally. And if you ever play D&D with me, you know that my characters are always lawful good or at worst chaotic good. So it makes sense that I connect with Ashitaka a lot. But I was rethinking about this today, and just the title of this panel and how timely it is, right? Seeing Eyes Unclouded by Hate. So Ashitaka is walking through a world, right, that is rife with conflict, and he is trying his damnedest to help it reach some type of equilibrium, right? He doesn't say San and the animal gods are right. He doesn't say Eboshi's right? As you mentioned, several you mentioned earlier, he goes back to work with Irontown to build it better, hopefully in a way that they can coexist, right? And that's kind of what we really need now. We really need to, at least I believe, I need to try and be Ashitaka to try to figure out how we can coexist. So, all right, that's my mic drop moment.
No, that was a good one. That was a good one.
Every once in a while, that arm's going to come out because you're in that world, man. I mean, and people are hurting and they need to be taken care of, right? Need to be protected.
That's kind of speaking to what Rio was saying, that by Ashitaka being this human bomb of sorts and given the instructions of moving through with eyes unclouded by hate, it's very interesting that in that context, what she's trying to do is say, don't go off too soon. You know, don't explode
Right.
before you're supposed to.
Right.
I need you to try to maintain a calm until you get to a place where you will do the most damage. And I think that's really interesting that in this world, what we really got to start doing is sometimes hearing what people are saying that we don't like and finding a truth within it that we can kind of meet them on to bring them to that space so that we can uncloud their eyes from the hate that they're spewing. We got to take that thing and kind of fix it and show it to them like, actually, this is what you said and this is what you actually meant. So let's look at it this way. And I think that's a great representation of what Ashitaka's job is.
On the character of Ashitaka, you know, the film was originally, and until the very end, Miyazaki intended to call it The Legend of Ashitaka, not Mononoke Hime, the Princess Mononoke as it's titled. The way that this happened was that Toshio Suzuki, the producer, had decided that it had a better ring to it if it's Princess Mononoke. It's the princess of the beasts of the wild, kind of directly translated, and it has a similar tenor to Nausicaä of the Valley of Wind, which is very closely connected to this film in other ways. But anyway, for Miyazaki, this story was always about Ashitaka's journey, about him taking on this curse and how or if he overcomes it, or if he's consumed by the hatred and the angst and the sadness and the injustices in the world. And Suzuki goes on a press conference and just announces to all of media, oh, the film's titled Princess Mononoke. And Miyazaki was furious. But at this point, all the media outlets have reported it as such, and so they can't go back. But yes, Ashitaka is always sort of the viewpoint and does try a lot of things. Here's another interesting thing, is that the way that he was designed or sort of depicted by Miyazaki, he's very polite, very proper. And initially he wasn't this way. Now, during production, Miyazaki had a meeting with another prolific writer named Ryotaro Shiba. Yes, that's also my name. We share a name. And no relation. But they were talking about the nature of tragic characters and how people react in the face of true tragedy. And Miyazaki was very moved by Shiba's words, which were that people experience true trauma, true tragedy. If they're brave enough, they don't whine, they don't cry out in self-pity. They sort of stand up. They face it, and in his words, they become polite, they become proper. So in this way, you don't really see Ashitaka react very strongly to much. Originally, Miyazaki had intended to have a lot more of like Ashitaka and his internal struggle, but we don't really see that. In the movie, it almost feels like Ashitaka doesn't react much to anything. He's just sort of like going along and trying to do the best he can, but internally, and this is actually the scene behind me. I chose this because this is a big part. He's leaving the village, the Emishi village, and he's just said goodbye to Kaya. He's smiling. He's like, I'll remember you forever, and running off. Internally, and this is a quote from Miyazaki, his soul is black with hopelessness and hatred and sadness. But the music and the scenery is beautiful. It's super cool. He's riding on Yakul. We're like, yeah. Oh, he kind of seems okay about this. No, internally he is struggling, and he does so throughout. We just don't really see it much, which is interesting.
Icebergs.
No, you wonder if that's some, and using the sort of a Hollywood Western trope, and then putting that out there, and then there's a layer. And the issue is, just to follow up on that, how do we discover that layer without reading something Miyazaki wrote about it afterwards? Is there something cultural that I, having been raised in the United States, wouldn't pick up on that might be there? Or I'm not, anybody?
Yes. That I mean, I think that this is a very Japanese film. While it's not based on a true story, there are a lot of elements based on Japanese legend and folklore. I mean, to the point where even Japanese people don't get certain things. For example, the spaghetti monster in the beginning. That actually is made to look like a spider monster called the Tsuchigumo. And this was in Japanese folklore a monster that was defeated by a famous general in like the 10th century. But Miyazaki purposely inserted this because in his world, the legend that was told of Ashitaka slaying the beast was misconstrued or purposely changed by historical context to be this general rather than Ashitaka. And it's very, very deeply rooted in Japanese like animism, in spiritual, Shinto. Kodama are something that, most people in Japan know what they are. They're tree spirits, of course. Like everything having a spirit, the forest, these wolves, the boars and the trees all have spirits. That's a pretty common belief in Japan that even if you're not, worshiping weekly, daily, whatever, it's something that you just sort of know in cultural context. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Fantastic.
And I got to give a shout out. I mean, again, I'm going to keep pointing out to this. Larry, you brought a similar ideal to Wolverine in the X-Men animated series, where he is shown initially as this killer, this unrelenting fury, but then at the same time, the level of emotion that he carries with him, the sense of sadness, the all the loss, the longing, the love that he wants to receive and is never reciprocated, is kind of that same thing, which I think is so brilliant. So in your own work, I want to give you some flowers and roses for doing something similar and making tried and true Buckeye like myself care about a Wolverine. Curse you for that.
Yeah, no, when we were doing at least the first season, we wanted to try and show that the characters, instead of being like, I'm a berserker or, and that's it, we wanted to show layers to the character of Wolverine. And so we, believe it or not, the love triangle didn't exist in the comic books. It was like written in one panel that was never expanded on it. And so when we were planning out season 1, we took it and blew it up. Okay, let's give him some feelings so he can react to the other characters other than just being angry. And then when he gets rejected, he goes to where the Eskimos are to try and get away from all the violence, and it comes after him. So we tried to add that layer to the story because we knew we wanted to make him accessible and just make a better story, better character out of him overall.
Love it.
The thing I like, getting back to the show, to the film, I love the subtext that everybody's bringing up here, because a lot of it I didn't know, but a lot of it, it's like that makes the writing really, really well thought out, because you can keep watching it over and over again. You keep picking, oh, I didn't see that before. I didn't see this before, and it makes the overall enjoyment of the film so enjoyable. And for you, Victor, I would add extra cameos of other Marvel characters in the show for you, because I added it for the fans.
Thank you.
I would add, but my rule to myself was that I would add those characters to the show if it didn't interfere with the story.
Right.
So it's like if the characters are walking by, I figured most people would think, oh, that's like a fire hydrant or a lamppost or a sofa. The average person wouldn't recognize what it is, but if you're a fan, you're going, I know that, and it's in and out in a second. But the fans would pick up on it, and so I did that for you guys.
Just to follow up on Victor's comment on Wolverine, and then who should be there when we introduce Nightcrawler but Wolverine?
Yeah.
Right. And they're both like yin and yang of each other to some extent. And it's a Nightcrawler who brings Logan to spiritual peace to some extent. And so Nightcrawler's contradictions, Logan's contradictions, their contradictions, just really good stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really
And
good
we had a very good standards and practice person she didn't come from cartoons. She was actually a live action person. And so she allowed us to push the envelope as far as we could to try and actually get better stories for Saturday morning, because the traditional has been write down to kids. We want to write up to kids. And so that's what she let us, go that extra mile to try and do better stories.
You could also say you wanted to write up to those 30-year-old adults who are still watching Saturday morning cartoons, because
I was gonna say, I feel seen. Yes.
Can I just say that Victor's fanboy energy is giving me life right now?
Listen, you don't understand, and I've told Larry this before. We did a panel together for Wizard World, and he, without me knowing him, he is who I wanted to be when I grew up.
Oh.
So like, this is one of those things where you're like, you didn't know. We didn't have the internet at the time. I couldn't know who the Larry Houston was, but now that I do, I'm like, that is exactly who I want to be when I grow up. So yes, this is.
Well,
I'm sorry.
So here's what we're gonna do. We have a question in the chat. So what we're gonna do, it's 8 o'clock. We'll do that question. I'll do my favorite character line thing after that, and we'll go from there. So Amelia, could you go ahead and read the first question?
Absolutely, Scott. So this question is from Trinity, and Trinity starts out by apologizing for the question being so long. Trinity says they adore this movie, and no apologies are necessary, Trinity. So here's the question. I am fascinated by the way Mr. Ryo Sagato described the wise woman's role in the story. I rewatched over and over the following scene where she tells him his fate and then he cuts his hair. I was so confused at why he was considered dead to them and could never come back, but I compare it now to the end of Hamlet. Once Hamlet realizes he has been struck with the poisoned sword, he becomes all-purpose and doesn't let any of his remaining life go unwasted. I kind of see Ashitaka in that way, as needing to be kicked out of his home and sent out with no hope of returning to make it so that he could go and see without being burdened by his past. Any thoughts on this interpretation or on that village scene with the famous line, to see with eyes unclouded?
Well, I didn't know audience members were allowed to drop the mic on us like that, but
that was great.
Anyone, go ahead.
Shakespeare reference and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyone?
I mean, I think it definitely serves this notion of needing to kind of have that sense that there is no going back. If there is the option to go back, then he doesn't move forward with the total purpose and dedication that you described. You're absolutely right. Like, there can be no plan B, particularly because the intent here is that, as Rio pointed out, this is so genius that he is supposed to be a weapon against other people. So if he does come back, he could potentially go off on the village itself, which would defeat the entire purpose. So they have to put it in a position where it's not even an option for him to come back. Like, him culturally, spiritually, he knows he is never to return, so that whatever danger he represents is never going to be invoked against his own people, and he didn't even know it. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To add a layer to that, just historically, if you think of samurai, and their kind of prized possessions and their kind of symbolism, the hair is like, it identifies you as, in terms of class, in terms of a warrior. That is your pride. You take care of that thing. They would typically kind of like shave their forehead area and put that thing up really nice, and make it look good all the time.
Well,
once
and
you
for
cut the hair
Ashitaka,
off,
that's a sign of his royalty. He was a prince until Schlink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that is part of, like, your ego, who you are, and that's taken away. So, while maybe like Western folks may think that's like, what's the big deal? Like, hair's gonna grow back. That's not the point. It's that once you cut that hair, that means you cut off that that lifeline, basically. And that's gone.
Identity.
You can't take it back. Yeah.
100%. I love this whole thing about the hair because this is a cross-cultural moment for me. In what Tatsu was saying, but also in many cultures, hair is strength. You know, we think of native cultures and in Latino culture, Mexican culture in particular, in our connections to native cultures. As a woman of hair, I can say it is a big, big deal to grow one's hair, and your hair is thought of as having a history with you, right? And then to then cut that off is a symbol of many things, of death, of new beginnings, of new life, and the shaving of the head in particular is like, whoa, that's a huge deal. So I think that moment is significant as it's related to, you know, the death of one thing and then the birth of something else, whether it's a new chapter or the actual person or the next part of the narrative kind of thing. The whole hair business is really significant.
Yeah, picking up on the what was Ashitaka doing kind of issue. I Tatsu mentioned it earlier, this idea of curse. And for me, Ashitaka bore the curse of caring. In other words, he becomes cursed because he saves his village from this beast. And then when he goes out into the world and he cares, things just amplify. Things get more violent. He becomes more violent, and he becomes more violent because he puts himself in harm's way because he cares time and time and time again. And I love this idea of caring. And to call it a curse doesn't mean it's bad. It just means you're going to be in the world as it is. And it's going to be beautifully ugly all the time. And things happen to you when you're there.
I was going to say, that's kind of exactly the embodiment of the instruction to go with Eyes Unclouded. He is as nice as he can be. And the goal is that it will eventually make him pissed, like at anything and everything, so that when he erupts, it is truly Mount Vesuvius, and he destroys as much as possible. Like, it's like, Rio, you don't understand what you just did in terms of breaking this down.
I fully knew that I was bringing a bomb to this panel.
Oh my God.
And I let it off pretty earlier than I
we
thought.
never cursed you. Why are you?
Well, and what I will say that it does piss him off. Like,
right.
he does care and he does get angry. We just don't see it that much. What we do see is the effect it has, which is the power of the curse. The more powerful the curse is, it's basically just showing us, oh, Ashitaka is mad. He hates things. He's sad.
Yeah.
The more he is, the more powerful that curse gets.
Oh my God. And he fights it. Like when it goes crazy and he just grabs his arm and he's just trying, like, no, it's not, don't do it.
Yeah.
So are you suggesting Ashitaka's the Hulk?
Kind of.
Yes. Expression of all of that
There
is
you go.
a shift in identity. It's a shift in identity, and it's a fluid shift in identity. So it's not necessarily permanent, but it's that, like, that holding back, that Eyes Unclouded by hate, but that doesn't mean there's no hate there.
Right.
It means that there's a control of the hatred until, like, you know, it comes out. It can be very Viper-like, or it can be very Hulk-like. Look at me, I'm the expert on hate now. But I see that identity shifting, right?
Yeah.
That is something that we see a lot of throughout the entire film.
So given that notion of Ashitaka trying to control his rage, I'm going to go to my favorite scene. And it's the scene where Iboshi has taken Ashitaka into her private space. And he's in the midst of the lepers as they're working on the guns. And all of a sudden he becomes very mad, and his arm goes over to grab the sword, and he tries to stop it. And she says, what do you want to kill me, Ashitaka? And he says, if it would stop the killing, I would. And then she says, well, you'd have to kill all of us to be at peace. So these two big forces of nature are having their fight. And then there's a leper off to the side that says one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard said. And that is, young man, like you, I know what rage feels like, and grief and helplessness. But you must not take your revenge on Lady Iboshi. She is the only one who saw us as human beings. We are lepers. The world hates and fears us, but she took us in and washed our rotting flesh and bandaged us. Life is suffering. It is hard. The world is cursed, but still you find reasons to keep living. I'm sorry, I'm making no sense. And it's that final line that just seals the deal. I'm sorry, I'm making no sense. Why are you making no sense? Because life is beautifully ugly contradiction from top to bottom forever. And it's us who try to make it simple, right? It's us who try to tell good, bad stories. And the leper retreats from the truth he just laid down, but it's just gorgeous. My favorite bit, period.
That's fantastic. That's
Yeah,
fantastic.
that was an excellent line too. Yeah, I remember that moment. That it really helped flesh out her character, and because you think of her as just being a villainess, it's like, no, this woman has compassion and leadership beyond what you normally would expect in that type of antagonist. I mean, you don't know how to place her now. It's like she doesn't fit into the mold that we usually get in these kind of films, and that was wonderful because now you had the complexity right there in front of you. So now the audience has got to figure out, who is she? You got to let the film continue to unfold and see how she reacts to all these different situations that are to come.
And they told us, they didn't show us.
Great.
In other words, everybody says, show me, don't tell me, but they did it so well
Sometimes
that they were told who she was by this leper she had saved. It's just stunningly well done.
I'm literally trying to fight the urge to make another X-Men correlation because you used that line for the world that hates and fears. So I'm like, look, this is why you love this, Larry. It's you. It's right there.
So, Amelia, do we have any more questions?
We don't have any more questions from the audience right now, but I will let you know if we do.
Okay, so then I have one for all of you. Jump in and we'll just see where it goes. Final question. Given how violent this movie is, what does it mean to say Hayao Miyazaki sees the world with eyes unclouded by hate? That's just it's out there. It's not me judging. It's just a question, and we'll see where it goes. Anybody jump in?
Well, killing is not always an act of hate. In fact, one could say in nature, the first most natural acts of killing is true love and devotion, right? It's the wild animal needing to eat. They love what it is that they're chasing because they need it. They love what it is that they're chasing because it's going to feed their young. It's going to help them grow. It's going to make them strong. So the act of killing is not automatically a sign of dismay or hatred. It is an outward pouring of natural love. It's a cycle, literally the circle of life, as Mufasa explains it. It's nothing but love. It's just going around over and over and over. So the killing part is not exactly the hatred part. It's the rationale for the killing. It is the unnatural moves. When Nagu was shot by one party and goes and attacks someone else because you're similar, that is hate. That is when you are taking this one instance, this one occurrence, and assuming and associating massive prejudice. Like, that is what hate actually is. Like, this is, it's so freaking topical for the world we live in right now. It's unending. So yeah, that's my initial freestyle off of that.
Yeah, I want to, and going back to that scene with the lepers too. I think one more kind of flavor that we can add to this discussion is that while Ashitaka claims that he is one with eyes unclouded by hate, I think that we also get this layer that it's just not, if you're looking out of a lens, it's not just about whether or not it's clouded by hate. There's zoom, there's focus. And I think that while Ashitaka sees it that way, he doesn't have that dial for focus or zoom like Eboshi does. That's where Eboshi's hate adjustments lie, is she can zoom out, see what it is in the world that's going wrong, and pick the things that really matter to her that she wants to focus on, right? Because if you just see the world out of a broad lens without having those kind of fine tuning, then you get very focused in you're very one track minded,
Very
like
narrow.
Ashitaka is. And I think that scene is exactly where he's exposed in that way.
Mm.
And so I think it brings up this point of like, you have your own view of hate. And until you see those different dials, those different adjustments, you're not going to get that full picture.
Nice.
And she built a town. I mean, talk about focus. There's a concrete space that she's putting her identity into. And that, no pun intended, but that is amazing grounding. You know, Ashitaka is just on a horse, man, or excuse me, a big red elk. He's not as grounded as she is. And that's stunning. Eric, you had a question.
Yeah, so I know Larry has mentioned before that Miyazaki's work has had a lot of influence on him. So Larry, is there sort of looking back on your own career, are there things that you can say, wow, Miyazaki really taught me this, or this is how he helped me break through on something else?
Oh, and that aspect, yeah, no, Miyazaki opened my eyes tremendously back in the early days, from Cagliostro's Castle and Castle in the Sky, because back then you got to remember it was all 2D, there was no 3D back then, and he was able to, the shows I was working on were basically, left or right, Hanna-Barbera, Flintstone, that kind of storytelling. And when we first saw his films, he had this fantastic ability to utilize to try and imitate 3D space in 2D space, and the shots he would design were so evocative, and you didn't need to actually know the language. I mean, most of his films that I watched in the early beginning, it was all Japanese. We go down to little Tokyo, get a laser disc, put it on, and at studios we just watch it. It's all Japanese language. I had no idea what they were saying, but he did the job so well. It was fantastic, and I would go to Little Tokyo and buy his storyboard books, and so I get those, and it's backwards to forwards, and I go through it and going, and just started analyzing, how did he create this shot? How did he create that shot? And I used that over and over again to try and increase my storytelling. And so that when I got to work on other shows, if I saw something that I could apply to, I would put it into the show and just start using that to help my storytelling better. And the other aspect that I love about what he does is that most of his stories are told from the perspective of kids, of younger minds. And the narrative that he creates is so natural that you're following like this entry point character into the story. And as the character learns more about what's going on, so does the viewer. And it's like you're traveling with them and learning stuff. In Castle in the Sky, when she's falling, he catches her like this. He has no idea what he's getting into. And as the story unfolds, we discover, and everything, it's so natural. I know when we were doing the very first episode of the X-Men, that's one of the things I talked to with the writers about, is that, how do you introduce this entire mythology, like in Princess Mononoke, to an audience who has no idea, we don't know Japanese culture, none of that stuff. And with us, we had a robot burst into the mall, cause havoc, and then the good guys come in, take care of the bad guy. She gets knocked out. She wakes up. She's in their headquarters, and as they explain stuff to her, they explain it naturally to us. And it's that type of narrative that Miyazaki evokes all the time, and I won't say all the time, but in a lot of films, they use this natural way of telling a story. And I love the way he does this. And it's, I actually prefer sometimes to listen to it in Japanese with subtitles because I love the original voices. You know.
That's a topic that I want to get into if you want to is dubbing.
This one right here had Keith David. When he started talking, I'm going, hey, that's Keith David. Because he was my voice for the Black Panther in Fantastic Four.
So
I went,
good.
oh, I didn't know he did this one.
The version I watched had Billy Ray Thornton's voice, and I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It works. It works.
So
that,
go ahead. Amelia is telling me that we have one more question. So Tatsu, go ahead and do your bit. No, go ahead, and then we'll go to the question.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that dubbing an anime is so hard. It's so hard because the culture in Japan of how they choose voice actors is very different. How they kind of build the story and kind of go through the scenes. The hardest thing to get right is the valence. The valence is so hard to get right in a dub. And that's why, sometimes you see anime dubs that just kind of come off just kind of as I can't think of the right word, but just kind of too poppy and I don't know.
Flippant.
It's just not the right. It's not the right emotion. Yeah, it is tone deaf, right?
Very sort of
but
bubbly, over.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not paying enough attention to the character.
Yeah.
But the dubbed Ghibli films have always gotten it right. They've always gotten it right for me. And Princess Mononoke is at the top of all of those. It's they paid the closest attention to what the mouths are saying, what the eyes are saying, what the body language, everything. And they got it right. They even added their own layer to it that I love. So there's one of the scenes that I really love is when Ashitaka carries San out of the village and he falls over. And her wolf brothers are they're doing their whole talking bit, whatever. And they're like, can we eat the elk? And San's like, no, of course not. And they're just like, I love that.
Can we eat him?
It's not the yeah, can we eat him? Panther.
That's I love Victor was talking about.
Yeah. But it's so good. Just those little things that they pay attention to. And I really appreciated that.
Tatsu, what I will say to that is that it wasn't always as good as Mononoke. I think Princess Mononoke is where they started getting good. First of all, it was the first theatrical release of a Miyazaki film. If you watch the original dubs of Castle in the Sky or Totoro, it's exactly what we're talking about. It's kind of tone deaf, it's done as if it's a cartoon.
For kids.
They don't there wasn't still a perception of anime being a film medium, but rather it's just another thing for kids.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the dub for Princess Mononoke is where it started getting good, and part of that is due to thank you Neil Gaiman, because what Miramax, who had gained the rights to it to distribute it, wanted to do was sort of take out a lot of the traditional Japanese context and make it a little bit more palatable, in their opinion, to the West. And even Gaiman says that, he maybe got about 85% of what's actually there into it. And I mean, we all know about how precious Ghibli is about their stuff. There's a no-cut policy. You all probably know about the legend of Toshio Suzuki sending a katana to Harvey Weinstein at Miramax. Unconfirmed as far as I know, but I will say that the things I have learned about Toshio Suzuki are pretty savage. But yeah, they did finally start. even though they definitely chose kind of a trendy cast, I think Minnie Driver was off an Oscar nom around that time, and like, but she does a fantastic job, mind you.
She does.
Yeah, she does.
And you know, Billy Crudup and Claire Danes, like they all do pretty good. And I do respect the effort. And yeah, from then on, and I think other productions started to catch on as well. They were like, oh, this can be done well, and we get a lot more out of it when we do that. That's good.
Yeah.
And because Gaiman, even the valence and the rhythm, that's part of what he had to do in the rewrite for the dub is to match the mouth movements of the characters on the screen. Yeah.
So Amelia, is there another question?
There is another question, and it's from an anonymous attendee. This is going back a little bit to what Eric was talking about towards the beginning of our panel. The question is, so with all the different rationale and definitions of what justice is there a way that all of these characters could have all worked and lived together as we are trying to do now?
That's the $1 million question, right?
I say no. Yeah, I say no. Because their goal wasn't to try to live together. That wasn't, every character had a separate intention, you know,
Yeah.
and so it was not to live together. Therefore, they could not live together. They had way too many things that were keeping them from that interest. They weren't interested in doing it.
You know,
And also this, going back to this thing about identity, you know, and that like I think there were multiple struggles for identity. The one that comes to mind is the chorus of women and the men, you know, and how the women, the roles are very gendered. The work, the labor is very gendered in these choruses, really. So you have the women and then you have the men who seemingly have the same goal as a community, but really not. There are these very stated, definite lines of who gets to do what, and I think that's an embedded issue that I don't see a commonality there. People just coming together and say, well, let's all get along and let's switch around our roles, kind of thing. But the other thing I wanted to mention that is somewhat related to that is this idea that the eyes unclouded by hate thing implies their people are implicated in that, right? So that implies that there are folks navigating with their eyes clouded by hate, that there are folks navigating with hatred as the driving force, but not just hatred, because for me, I didn't really see a pure hatred in this film, but I saw a lot of fear. Fear of change, fear of changing roles, fear of, you know, whatever kind of displacement, and that can often lead to a sense of injustice, a sense of personal injustice, and then a sense of the hatred of the other. So I
That's
think in that way
fantastic.
there's a connection.
When Tatsu and I were teaching the course, we called it Wild Identities. And what we were trying to do was get the students to look at their identity as something that's not in their head, but what stays the same in the world because you're here, right? And look at the world outside of you as who you are. And so if you bring that to the question of could they have lived together, what I love about Miyazaki is that he goes, you're going to. You're not going to not. And you're going to live together and either fight, and you're never going to escape conflict at every level. So stop looking at life as if it's about a happy ending and being good. It's about management of all these different aspects of your world. And I just love how Miyazaki brought that, put it on the table, and can't answer anybody's question if Ashitaka was good or bad. I just love it.
If I may add to what you're saying, Scott, you know, I've had interest in the psychology of moral decision making, right? And there's some research in there that talks about, for example, this concept of moral conviction or moral certainty, right? So I might actually take our panel title and tweak it a bit. So instead of eyes unclouded by hate, maybe eyes unclouded by conviction or by certainty, right? Because as I think the question suggested, right, all these different ideas of justice This is the problem, is that when we have moral certainty, we believe we're right and everything else is wrong. And if we sort of have that almost knee-jerk heuristic, right, then it blinds us to everything else. It blinds us to the complexity, the beautiful ugliness that Scott's made reference to, right? So maybe that's one way. I mean, at the end of it, we don't know what happens, right? You know, they go to their separate places, and
They
what
keep
happens the
living.
next day.
Exactly.
They
Well,
just keep living. And I love your comments, Eric, because it forces us to ask, is there a thing called justice out there? Right? I mean, because we act like it is. We act it's something out there, we've got a name for it, but what I see is a lot of things living and a
It's
lot
balance.
of things moving.
It's
Yeah.
balanced.
Well, everyone's trying
Scott,
to survive.
if I can
right?
jump in for a second,
Yeah.
this is Amelia. So one of the reasons we started ReggieCon to begin with, and when Scott brought us this idea at the beginning of the year, was to allow our students at Illinois State to have these conversations and hear people like you have these conversations. And we've just promoted a student to be a panelist, Trinity, who had the mic drop question for tonight, and who has asked several different questions for many of our ReggieCon panels. Trinity is here with us. She can unmute her camera if she wants to, and unmute her her audio if she wants to.
John,
But we thought with this last ReggieCon panel, we'd love to bring Trinity in to interact with the panelists in the last few minutes of the panel, and give us a face of the students that we were doing all of these ReggieCon panels for. So thank you for being here, Trinity. And this is the panel. This is Trinity.
Hi, Trinity.
Hey, Trinity.
Hi.
Trinity.
Before we move
Hello.
on, wait, before we move on, I wanted to say, Teresa, that was such a poignant perspective to drop on this day, which
Yeah.
geekly is referred to Revenge of the Sixth, in reference to Star Wars and the notion of fear being the true hatred piece, because as they say in Star Wars, fear, breeds anger, anger leads to hatred, and hatred leads to the dark side. It is this totality of so many things that pop culturally we have embraced and accepted, and here it is shown to us as to how it actually works without this idea of good or bad actually being at play, but true balance, which I think, you saying that today, I'm like, look at her, geek cred on point, on fleek. I love.
Can I drop another bomb?
Uh-oh, here we go.
A quick one.
uh-oh.
Okay, this is very quick. In the Japanese, untranslated, there it doesn't say eyes unclouded by hate. It just says eyes unclouded. Hate's
Wow.
not in the picture.
Wow.
I mean, it's implied. It can be
But they don't
construed as
say it.
such, but it's not there.
Wow.
Just saying.
Okay, so Trinity, what do you want to say to us? Or do you have a question?
First of all, I just want to say that I really enjoyed all these ReggieCon panels. I think it was the Black Panther one where I was just sobbing, like, because someone just had like an answer to a question or just an amazing comment, and every single one of these I have been like typing notes, but I just have to stop and be like, oh my gosh, being a human is so hard.
It's true.
That's the title of our next gig.
Yes.
I believe Philip K. Dick wrote a series called Being a Human. It's so hard.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Brilliant.
the whole conversation about representation in media, and especially with Princess Mononoke, which doesn't like explicitly have like a group but is more focusing on like humans in general. I really appreciate that we're talking about one of my favorite movies of all time, because I think it's so powerful, and I hope that whoever got to watch it for the first time just loved it as much as I did.
They'll have to watch it 3 more times to get, yeah.
Happy to do it.
I just want to follow up on what you're saying there, Trinity. What I love about this movie is it teaches us to embrace contradiction. Don't ask the world, don't ask being to be simple. And there's a story I've heard about Miyazaki was looking in some water that was toxic in some way, and saw organisms struggling to live in that water. And that movie ends with he's just telling us to live, right? And I just love that story, which is not what we often hear. What we hear is be right. What we hear is be wrong. and then all kinds of fears creep in, as Victor and Teresa were saying.
Or we
All
don't
right.
take the time to listen to others,
Yeah.
right? We just want to
Yeah.
be heard, and we're not even conscious of what we're saying. We just want to, it's that moment when you're waiting for someone to stop speaking so you can jump in
Yeah.
instead of actually processing what they're saying. Thank you so much for being here, Trinity, and for your questions.
Yeah.
For the series, it's been really cool to see
Definitely.
the questions you come up with.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it.
Very cool that you came.
I'm
in.
sure I had the response that made you cry, by the way.
Definitely, it was you. Had to be you.
I know there definitely was one. I think it was probably one of those joint questions where I asked a question and several people jumped onto it. And I was just like, oh, my heart.
Well, we do this because the stories coming out of pop culture right now are the better stories we're hearing in our culture. So we got
And have been since Larry was working on X-Men. I'm sorry. I'm just
truth. I mean, I was 30 plus years old watching Saturday morning, like, what the hell is this? What? I haven't heard this kind of talk in my daily life unless I'm telling someone else what the world is. My goodness, this is fantastic. Okay, so look, it's 8:30 Central Time, and unfortunately, it's time to bring this final ReggieCon to a close. ReggieCon crew, any final thoughts on the year? And this time we'll go in reverse order and start with Eric.
Just the year generally, the year.
No, the ReggieCon year, man.
Oh, okay. I put you on the spot. Just that I've loved every minute of it. The conversations, the students' questions, and I'm sad we have to take a break, but I look forward with anticipation in the fall.
That's awesome. How about you, Teresa?
I'm scarred by that moment right there.
There you go.
I am just so grateful and excited to have been part of this, to be part of the crew. I like being part of a crew. It's fabulous.
It's an awesome crew.
Yeah, it really is. And thank you to Scott, for the initial invitation. And we started with Day Tripper, and that was just such a fantastic start. And then finding out that Victor was on the crew, and Victor and I go back to Ohio State. Go Bucks!
That's right. OH.
IO. Oh, it's still in there. See, but I really have enjoyed meeting all of our guests. And just such a collection of talent and intellect and scandal and behind the scenes, which I always love. That's my thing. Right. It's been really such a pleasure, and I'm so looking forward to next year. And I just want to repeat that the Latinx Comic Arts Festival, we're planning in person March 25th and 26th. And so I hope folks will be able to join us for that, and we'll do some kind of broadcasting element for that. But thank you, of course, to the students and to Trinity for being there, for our audience, and also all of our amazing tech folks. I'm so happy I don't have to do any tech.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Teresa. How about you, Victor?
So as the one person without doctor in front of their name, to be a part of this crew is beyond an honor. To be applauded and to be able to have conversation with such stellar minds is just fantastic. I mean, from the crew itself to all the different guests that we've had, it's been amazing, because for so long comics and pop culture have been kind of relegated and ridiculed as something juvenile or remedial and not literature or thought-provoking. And those of us that are in the geek in the know, we've been saying for a long time, no, this is everything. And these conversations bring that to light, hopefully to a lot of people that never saw it that way. We're that forefront, we're the vanguard that's showing people that there's so much more of life that is within these pages, within these movies, within these things that we've come to know and love. And we're sharing that with more people, growing our communities and our circles. I love it.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much to the three of you for joining me on all these panels this year. An idea turned into a reality that I just don't want to do without. So fantastic. We're going to go to the special guest now. Tatsu, I usually we end this and I don't give the special guest an opportunity to say anything. We're just going to bye y'all. But Tatsu, any final words?
Yeah, I just want to say, thanks for having me here. It's been a lot of fun. It's, Scott and I go back years now, and it's so cool to have been having these conversations kind of since the get-go when we met, and Scott figured out that I'm also an anime nerd. It's great. And literally, like, it's to the point where I went to Japan. I go to we went to this it's not a comic book store. It's the store that Rio loves that has like all sorts of movie like paraphernalia and like all this stuff. I literally got Scott a little booklet of The Wind Rises, and I know it's branded this up, but that sort of thing. And I think that the greatest thing about anime is that it brings people together. And it creates a space for like-minded folks to discuss our things. Like Victor's saying, like, it gives you that platform to be able to discuss things that matter. So yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, and keep on keeping on.
Very cool. I have to tell all of you, this young man sang season 3 Full Metal Alchemist theme song Golden Time Lover in Japanese in my basement. I was plunking out the bass. Your roommate was a killer drummer.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Peak experience. We did not get it on tape because I told everybody no taping in my basement. So Rio, how about you? Any final words?
I was trying to remember the shop that you're talking about, Tatsu, and I just remembered it's called Eiga no Boken, which means the adventure of film. And who knows who hears this, but sending out good vibes to that shop and that owner. He's cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that sort of building on Tatsu, what you're saying about anime bringing us together. At the very beginning, I said that I've made more friends watching this film than anything else, and that's not really a far exaggeration. Like, anime and artwork media of all kinds does bring us together. And what's really interesting specifically about Princess Mononoke is that it was born of sort of Miyazaki's turmoil over the wars in former Yugoslavia. And he had a lot of feelings towards that. And I have a quote here. He says, "I learned that mankind doesn't learn. After that, we couldn't go back and make some film like Kiki's Delivery Service. It felt like children were being born to this world without being blessed. How could we pretend to them that we're happy?" So Miyazaki had a lot to say. This film was basically his sort of revenge for Nausicaa, where he didn't get to do everything that he wanted. And this was intended to be his final swan song film. He is quoted as saying, I intend to drive Studio Ghibli into the ground with this film. Like, he was going hard on this. But the irony of everything is, and this is just that same sort of like dichotomy, conflict, opposing forces, opposites that we're talking about, that something born of hate becomes something so beautiful and unifying for all of us. We're all here because of this, because we care, because we want to be with each other. It's hard to think about, sometimes we're only thinking about ourselves, or we do things and rationalize it later as we're doing the right thing. But to truly, the desire is there. At least I want to believe that we all do want to be and do things together. And I guess that's kind of what I want to leave with. Yeah.
Well said.
There's a mic drop. So, Mr. Larry Houston, any final thoughts?
First, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. I was honored to be a part of this. I'm glad Eric reached out to bring me along with this, because otherwise, I get a chance to talk to a lot of people who enjoy the same type of films that I have. And I'm really enjoying what Rio's bringing, because there's a lot of background about Miyazaki I didn't know about. You're telling me stuff I didn't know.
I have more bombs.
Huh?
I have more bombs.
Oh.
on his desk.
We'll save
Right.
those for the after party.
Okay.
'Cause I've been a fan of his work since '80, and every time they had a film, I was watching. It was all new, and it was always unfolding for me, and I was learning more and more about storytelling from him every time the film came out. But I didn't know all the subtext that you're bringing out, and that's wonderful to hear about, because I would read about what he was thinking in the sometimes in some publications or some articles here and there, but I didn't know what what you told me. It was like, that's great to know, because I didn't know that. And I no, it's my my enjoyment of this entire conversation we've had here is wonderful. I love you guys' takes on everything, because it's making me think about stuff I didn't think about before. But it's like I said, his narratives, obviously he's gotten more and more sophisticated as he's gotten older and older. And Mononoke really is fantastic, what he put together. Like I said, he's gotten more serious as time went along. And it's a long film. Basically, make sure you go to the bathroom before you sit down.
Absolutely.
You're ready to pause.
Well,
Yeah.
Larry, we absolutely love what you've said here tonight. We've learned from you as well. Thanks to all of you in the audience and everyone here for attending. We'll see you next year. We'll have a slew of amazing panels, and thanks to the crew behind the scenes again for a year of fantastic work. And have a good evening.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.